This is a Merrick Studios podcast. This week on Unglossy.
I think one of the things people have to understand about the Sandusky stuff as it relates to Joe and certainly as coaches. There's a misperception out there that somehow Joe knew about this, that we ignored it, we covered it up, we looked the other way. I was around Jerry Sandusky as a kid. My kids were around Jerry Sandusky as a kid. So no matter what you think about me as a coach or whatever, you would have to think I'm an absolutely horrible human being if I would put my kids around there and say, oh, the football program's more important.
Hey, football fans, you could win a once-in-a-lifetime trip to the 2026 Pro Football Hall of Fame enshrinement events, in person, in Canton. How do you kick this off? Grab Snapdragon apples at your local store, then go to snapdragonapple.com for official rules and enter. No purchase necessary. Ends February 28th, 2026. Open to U.S. residents 18 and older. Void where prohibited.
From the top.
Go ahead.
I'm Tom Frank.
I'm Jeffrey Sledge.
And I'm Bun B. Welcome to Unglossy.
Real stories, unfiltered dialogue, and the voices moving culture beyond the gloss of hype and headlines.
So buckle up, Unglossy starts now.
What's going on, fellas?
What up? What's going on? We got a big guest today.
We got a good guest here. Before we get to him, though, I want to say something here. Though we talk a lot about brand, identity, culture, and I think we all would all agree that a big part of that is ultimately where you're from, where you grow up, right? I mean, if you look at Bun is probably as Houston can be, and talking to Jeffrey. I mean, is there a more New York City guy than Jeffrey, even though he doesn't live there anymore?
Even though you be disrespecting me with my New York thing, but we'll get into that later.
You can take the man out of New York, but you can't take the New York out of the man.
Thank you, Bun. Thank you.
That is right. Unlike you guys, though, I didn't grow up in a major city. I grew up in a small town, central Pennsylvania, a college town. It most definitely left a very big impression on me. And I can say that, some of my favorite memories were Saturdays in the fall. Friends, family, football. I mean, I'm from State College, Pennsylvania. That's where Penn State is. And it wasn't just a school. It was kind of a pulse of that town. And it was when football was pure. It felt like it was done the right way. And at the center of it all was a guy named Joe Paterno. That was the world that I knew, that I grew up in. And then one fall, that world kind of cracked. And I don't know if I ever saw things the same way that I did back as a kid. And so, today we have a guest who kind of lived that whole story from the inside out. And I had the pleasure of knowing this guy since high school. He's maybe a tad little older than me, a little bit older than me. I graduated with his younger brother, but his name carries meaning. It's pride for some. It is even pain for others. But he's been a long time Penn State coach, a writer, a speaker, an activist. And as I said, he's the son of the late Joe Paterno. He just released his new book, Blitzed, which pulls back the curtains on the pressures, politics, and realities shaping sports today. So welcome to Unglossy, Jay Paterno.
Thanks for having me on. And Jeff, my dad's a Brooklyn guy, so New York. Never got Brooklyn out of him.
Yeah, I went
61 years in State College, and he still talked like he was from Brooklyn.
Yeah. I moved. I was born in one place and moved to another. When we first moved there, that my neighborhood was mostly Italian. Eventually, flipped, turned black, but it was mostly Italian. So there's a lot of things in your father and people of his generation that I recognize. I know that. I know that Italian. I know that. I know what that is. You and your mom. It's like I know your father, but I never met your father. But I know your father. I know that. I know what that is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we got a lot to get into here. We got books. We got the state of college football today, which I think we would all agree is kind of a mess, and that might be kind of fun to get into. But I do want to start back in Happy Valley, and I wanted to just share with you guys. Like, I grew up there, as I said, and I absolutely loved fall Saturdays. To me, Penn State home games, like, we lived in like this little utopia where every Saturday it was a family reunion. I had aunts, uncles, everybody came into town. Saturday morning, most games were at noon back then. You packed up your stuff, you tailgated, you went up to the big game. I can't believe my parents did this, but going to Penn State games, my parents had season tickets. Me and my cousin are 10 and 12 years old, and our job was to figure out how to get into the game. And so, that was it. Like, get into the
take
game,
the
and
ticket
then
stub and you go to the fence and you stick it through the fence and you get it, and the next guy comes in.
well, now we went
Guilty.
we took a different route here. Like, this is how I learned in some way how to get a job out of this. So we would go up to the games. We'd go around that, around the entire stadium, and I was a cute little kid. I was short. I would go up to the oldest people you could find. I'd get a ticket for like $10 because we would come up with like $20 in our pocket, buy a ticket for $10. My cousin was about a foot taller than me. I'd hand him the ticket. He'd hold it up. We'd sell it for 20. And then we would just keep doing this until we got into the game. And eventually get a 10 and a 12-year-old doing this at this point in your life. Get into the game. The only rule was I had to find my dad by the end of the first quarter and tell him I was okay. But could you imagine your kids? Like, I can't imagine just dropping my kid off at 110,000 person stadium and telling them, just make sure you find me before the end of the first quarter.
So it's always been that occupancy. It's always been that many seats in that stadium.
I mean, like the last 25 years or so. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's always
been it. And you kids, it just get dropped off and you're just there at the game.
You just went.
Yeah.
Now, I'm thinking, my experience is probably different than yours. You probably weren't scalping tickets, but I got to think that you had a growing up experience similar to that, right?
Well, we sat in the kids section because my dad, in his contract, didn't get free tickets.
Wow.
So there was a kids section. He never asked for it. He's like, you pay me to coach, I coach. Okay, whatever, So we had season tickets, and there was a kids section in the end zone. So I sat in the end zone until I was 15 years old. Wasn't in a box, none of that crap. And then when I was 15, I got a job doing stats in the press box. And I made, I think, $10 or $15 a game, got all the hot dogs and Coke I could drink. And that was it. And I would do stats, or I would do ABC had this line you would call to get, and they would read scores off constantly. So I would write down the scores in the other game, and I'd give it to the PA guy, and he'd say in scores of other games, Alabama 10 and LSU 7 second quarter. I was the guy who would get those scores for him. So that was how I bumped up from my season tickets in the end zone. And then I did that till I was in college, and I was on the team. So then that was a whole different experience.
Wow.
No, it was fun. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
I'm sure.
Was that more of your dad's philosophy? Like, I'm just here to coach. Like, was that ever a thought? I'm thinking back to this era. Was that a thing where coaches just got tickets, or like, could you have asked your dad back then? You know what I'm saying? Hey, can we get seats in this section, or can we get on the 50 or anything like that? I
could have asked, but he would have said no. He said, no, the kids section, there was a bunch, I'm showing my age. But a lot of the kids I went to school with, we were all in that section.
Oh, so you had a good time.
So like your friends were there, and it was next to the student section. So you'd see some funny stuff coming out of that student section. Occasionally a student would, I remember getting the student wandered out. He had a good time tailgating, and it was cold. He had one of those. You remember those old parkas that used to zip all the way up, like almost like the Philly Fanatic?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this dude was sitting in the kids section. He was a college student, and his head was down, and the bourbon was being sent back. And it was just drooling right out of the end of the snout that he had on. I was like, I was like, you know what? I am never going to drink like that in my life. That converted me.
That's
that converted you.
I want to ask you one question, Jay. I was watching, some interviews to try to get prepared for today, and I noticed a lot of times you called your father Joe. You didn't say dad. You didn't say my dad. You said Joe. Was that a like? Did you call your father Joe in person, or was that just for the sake of the interview?
When I was on the team, and then when I came back to coach for 17 years, anything professional, there was a line. Mm. So if I was in the office, or I was in the team, or whatever it was Joe or coach, because we wanted to be able to delineate it mentally as much as anything. And then, if I was at the house for dinner, or I was over there with my kids, it was dad this, dad that. But when it was a professional situation, it was as much for he and I to keep it straight. But also, if you're in a staff meeting and you're getting into a heated debate, and you start saying, but dad this and dad this, and it puts everybody else on edge. So we just had that. And, you know, Penn State's their men's ice hockey team is really good, and the coach lives down the street. And his son transferred back. His son was a finalist for what was essentially the Heisman in college hockey, but he transferred back to Penn State. And he asked me, and I gave him that same advice. And he just saw him a week ago. He said that might be the best advice you gave, because it's given everybody that delineation between that father son and the coaching professional side of it.
Interesting.
No, I get it, because when I taught for a while at Rice University, the professor I taught with, Dr. Penn, was adamant that people not refer to me as Bun B on campus. He was like, "You're Professor Freeman, you're prof, whatever. You're on
Yeah.
campus and you're operating in a professional capacity. They should refer to you as your professional designation," which in those scenarios was professor. So I tell kids, look, if you see me off campus, I'm Bun B. As soon as we cross that street, I'm Bun B. You can ask me all of that type of stuff. But on campus, as an educator, I would appreciate it if I was referred to as professor. And Dr. Penn was very adamant about that. Like, he's prof. He's not your friend on campus. He's not, you know, he's not a rapper here to rap or anything like that. He's a professor to educate. So I get it. He was very adamant about drawing that line, you know? So I totally get it.
And you played for your dad, right? From 86 to
86 to 89 was my last season. So 86 through 90. Yeah.
Wait, so 86 was a national championship year. Or was
Yep.
that the year? Yeah. So you were on a national championship.
I was on that team.
You
What's it
guys
like
really-
being
wild.
coached?
This is
What's it
our
like being
second
coached by
straight
your dad?
national champion right here.
Yeah.
That game against Miami was wild. I mean,
Yeah.
Michael Irvin was on that team. You know, I've been laughing watching Michael Irvin go through this thing the last couple of weeks, because, you know, he gets that belt out. You take out the tape of that game against us. We held them to 10 points. We got 7 turnovers. That was one of the best defensive performances. They ran 90 plays and scored 10 points with the Heisman Trophy winner, Michael Irvin. Jerome Brown was on that defense. I mean, we just, but Michael Irvin, I think third or fourth play of the game, ran a post, and they came out in pregame and they looked at our DBs, and we didn't have a guy over 5'9". They were all small. And they said that we had a linebacker named Shane Conlon, who is as good as ever played here. And Michael Irvin comes over, and one of those guys says, "Those are your DBs. Boy, they're not very big." And he goes, "You haven't been hit by him yet." And the animosity on the game pregame was through the roof. It was the most intense pregame warm I've ever seen in my life, even all the years coaching. Third or fourth play of the game, Irvin is running a post, and he gets the test already puts it on him. He takes 2 steps, and our safety just absolutely cranks him. Ball comes out, we get it. Irvin turned down a bunch of catches the rest of the game. And so when I see him doing all that stuff, I'm laughing and going,
You remember that? Yeah.
Well, I remember. And, you know, it's so long ago, the wideouts were in 3-point stances. That's how long ago that game was. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Michael Irvin played wideout in a 3-point stance at Miami.
Wow.
And if
But
I
so did
remember-
everybody else, too.
That was the game too. Didn't they come off of the they came off of the airplanes, right? In full fatigues. Wasn't that the game where
In camos, and then we had a team dinner with both teams, and they stormed out. Jerome Brown got up in the microphone and said, "Did the Japanese sit down with the Americans before they bombed Pearl Harbor?" "No, we're out of here." And so one of our guys went up and goes, I think the Japanese lost that war, didn't they? And then that was like, oh. So there was a lot of this going on the whole week. It to this day has the highest rating of any college football telecast in history to this day.
Really?
Almost 40 years later.
I remember that game like it was yesterday.
Who was the
a
quarterback for Penn
fantastic
State?
game.
Pardon?
Who's the Penn State quarterback?
John Schaefer, who never played it down the pros and was just, you know, you talk about a game manager, that's what he was, and a great leader. And we had a great defensive football team, and we knew if we were up by more than 3 late in the game, we knew we were going to win, because no one was going to get in the end zone on that defense at that point in the game.
Wow.
Now, Jay, playing under your dad, right? Like, having your dad coach you at the collegiate level. I'm looking at this scenario as to where, say, for example, you have a bad play, right, in the game. The average player hears about it at practice, meetings, and whatnot. You got to hear about it at dinner.
Well, I didn't play much because I didn't have the talent the other guys did. So there wasn't so much this stuff in the games. But the first practice, I was wearing full pads. I'm a freshman, and I'm running scout team. And, it's that defense I just told you about where these guys are really, really good.
Yeah.
I get absolutely trucked. Helmet is like sideways, and I get up and I'm like, and my dad's watching the drill, and I kind of look over his way. He is laughing. There was no sympathy whatsoever.
Wow.
And he said to me, Jay, he goes, a lot of guys would love to hit me. They can't hit me.
They hear you.
They can hit you.
Exactly.
He said, that's what you signed up for. But, it was a great I knew I wanted to coach. So I played knowing that I wasn't going to be a great college football player or be a starter at Penn State. But, I got on the depth chart and was second and third at times. But it was a great relationship building thing for my dad and I, because we had something. When you grow up with somebody like that, they get pulled a lot of ways, so you lose some things. But between that and coaching, we really my relationship with him changed dramatically, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah.
And so you wanted to be a coach. I mean, was it in your blood, or you just wanted to be a coach from day one? Is that true?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I just growing up around it and being around it, and he'd be watching film, and when I say film, I mean real film back then with reels and all that stuff. That's again showing my age. So I mean, I'd go into his den when he was at home watching film, and I'd kind of look over his shoulder and see what was going on, and I'd start asking questions, and I got the bug. But really, what I loved about coaching was this. I loved being in a position when in college, and the great thing about college coaching as opposed to the NFL is these 18-year-old guys come in, they think they have all the answers. And about 3 weeks later, they realize they don't. And then you see them, and then by the time they hit 21, 22 years old, they have all the answers again. And as I look back on my career as a coach, it's not, there were things that happened, great games, tough losses, things, but it was the ability to have an impact. My first year as quarterback coach, I coached tight ends from 95 through 99. My first year as a quarterback coach, we had a quarterback named Rashard Casey. And Rashard Casey was a black quarterback. He went home to Hoboken in May. And he was accused of hitting a white cop in what they issued, or they stated was a racial incident. It was total BS. It did not happen. He was, they were, and, I sat down with him, and then Joe and I talked, and Joe said, look, this is a corrupt sheriff situation. He said, if we have to lose some games to do the right thing for Rashard Casey, we're willing to do that. And we stood by him. And the world came after us. I mean, they came after me, they came after Rashard, they came after Joe, but we stood by him. And those are the kind of things that have always stuck out about. Those are some things I'm proudest about, is the fact that it was about more than the game. That I worked for a guy who was willing to do the right thing, was willing to lose games to do the right thing, if that's what it took. And it did cost us some games, because Rashard had to play that season with that hanging over him. And it wasn't until the middle of November where he was finally cleared. But I mean, this was a situation where you had they put him in a lineup, and the witness says he's not there. They take the witness out and said, no, he's third from the left. Witness goes back and said, yeah, that's him. I mean, that's what we were dealing with. And, but that's what taking a stand is about. Whether you coach or anything, I mean, what's right is right. And I always felt that at Penn State, I could always do what was right.
So on that note, though, let's dive into ultimately what happened there. You coached for 17. I didn't realize you had coached there for 17 years.
Yeah.
I can remember, I mean, you guys won a lot of games, but, fans are fickle. I could remember being at home and people were like, God, if Jay would just keep calling the same play, I'm sure you dealt with that all the time.
Listen, if you go 11-1, all anybody wants, there's some fans, all they want to talk about is the one.
Yeah. But ultimately things changed and there was a crisis there. I mean, when you look back on that, I mean, walk us through that. Walk us through kind of the emotions and what you went through as a person that was kind of, you were literally in the middle of it. It wasn't happening necessarily to you, but it was happening to you.
Yeah, I mean, First of all, I think one of the things people have to understand about the Sandusky stuff as it relates to Joe and certainly as coaches. There was a 3-year grant. There's a misperception out there that somehow Joe knew about this, that we ignored it, we covered it up, we looked the other way. I was around Jerry Sandusky as a kid. My kids were around Jerry Sandusky as a kid.
I was around, yeah.
No matter what you think about me as a coach, whatever, you would have to think I'm an absolutely horrible human being if I would put my kids around there and say, oh, the football program is more important. The truth of the matter is we did not know. It just, and the first time that anything was brought to my dad's attention, he reported it exactly to the fullest extent he was allowed to. Because you're not allowed to go out on your own and look for people, because you have to protect the anonymity of the victim and you have to protect the integrity of the investigation. So in a multi-year grand jury investigation into Jerry Sandusky, and keep in mind the incident that was brought to Joe's attention, Jerry had already retired. He'd been retired for 2 years at that point. So in a 3-year grand jury investigation, Joe was in the grand jury for 7 or 8 minutes total, because he was a tangent to this case. He was a guy, he didn't witness a crime, he didn't commit a crime, he was told of one and then reported he was supposed to. So I think that's important for people to understand that. And in fact, the Attorney General of the state of Pennsylvania commended him for the way he handled it. But as you know, in the world that we live in, what's actually true and what actually gets reported often spiral out of control. And if a lie is repeated enough, it takes on the aura of truth in this environment. So that's what happened in those days. It came out, the presentment came out, they were going to charge him. And then all of a sudden this thing cycled, and the media started to realize the clicks and the attention were all coming if you attached it to Joe. If you mentioned Joe, you got more clicks. If you mentioned Penn State, you got more clicks, even though Jerry had not worked at Penn State in 12 years.
Yeah.
So that's really what kind of spiraled out of control. So from the inside, on a Friday afternoon, we had an off week that week. So I'm out in Ohio recruiting. I get a call from my brother, and he says, hey, who's an attorney, he said, hey, just want you to be aware, this is going to break. This, the story about Jerry is going to break, and he's going to get arrested. Okay. So I on my way home, I'm starting to realize this is going to be bad, obviously. Saturday morning, it just goes out of control. By Monday afternoon, everybody's trying to blame Joe for what happened instead of the person that actually was charged. And so it got to the point where you just couldn't control the story anymore. So it landed because all the clicks and the attention and the money to be made was made by writing stories about Joe, to the point where, Wednesday night, Joe gets fired. Saturday on Saturday Night Live, they do a skit on Weekend Update. And they don't mention Jerry Sandusky's name one time. They mention Joe over and over and over again. They mentioned Penn State over and over again, even though Joe didn't commit any crimes doing it. So from the inside, you are trying to tell people the truth, and no one is listening, and you feel powerless. I mean, I look at what's happening in Minneapolis with the woman that was shot and killed. Okay. And how so many powerful people are trying to make her the bad person, even though she's not. And that her family is trying to push back. You look at what happened with George Floyd, all of a sudden it was somehow George Floyd was at fault because the powers that be wanted to make him at fault, even though people were trying to say, wait a minute, hold on. And so you feel that powerless. Obviously, it wasn't to the extent of what happened to Renee Good or to George Floyd, but I have an understanding of what that's like to be a family member and see these things happen to people, and feeling that sense of powerlessness when all the machinery of the powers that be is lined up against you.
How did your family deal with that pressure? Like, did it take a toll physically? Obviously, some mentally. Did your father's health suffer? Like, well, because that was just nonstop every day. You wake up and you walk right into it.
Yeah, I mean, there were dozens and dozens of people across the street for days on end. He couldn't leave the house. And then, that happened on like they showed up outside the house on a Monday or Tuesday. Friday, he had to sneak out to go to the hospital because he was coughing up blood. And they found out. So to get him to the hospital, he had to go into the garage with the door shut, lay down in the back seat of the car on the floor. Wow. And then they put a blanket kind of over the back seat. And then my sister would open the garage door and come out like she was going in the car by herself, like nobody was in there, and then drive away. And they took him there and they found out, they did some tests and they found that he had lung cancer, which certainly the stress of that accelerates it. And about 2.5 months later, he died.
Yeah.
But he didn't know. And when our doctor had done a chest x-ray of him that previous July, because he had had some pneumonia before and there was nothing there. So this really occurred and accelerated like that. But, that was on top of all the other stuff going on. And even though Joe got fired with 3 or 4 games to go, I'm still on the staff and I still had to coach the rest of the year. So that was you felt like your bizarre world. I mean, you're going into work and the guy that you worked for 17 years off suddenly is gone. So the
And it's your father.
mental aspect of it was just brutal. But in 2011, we didn't talk about mental health like we do now. I think it's a good thing that we talk about it now. But back then it was like, suck it up, rub some dirt on it, just go to work and do your thing. And it took its toll. There's no question. And my kids were all 11 years old and younger. And I was so busy trying to fight the good fight, that I didn't even realize what it was doing to my kids. And thankfully, my wife, I mean, I give her all the credit to this day. She held the fort together and kept the kids kind of from going off the rails because I wouldn't have noticed. I was just too busy doing the other stuff. And I say that as self-criticism, not as anything that I'm proud of.
Wow.
So you're still actively involved with Penn State, right? And
yeah, but I'm on the board of trustees.
You're on the board of Is there any part of you that, like, to me, when because I didn't realize that until I read that just recently that you were on the board of trustees. Like, there's a part of me that, like, as you, I would have kind of rebelled against that. Like, I would have held Penn State a little bit in like, what are you guys doing here? You didn't stand by us. I don't know. Does that ever? To me, I give you a lot of credit for still doing that.
Well, there's some people on the board with me now that think I'm a rebel, and I've been, no, all kidding aside, look, I've always felt like the people that made the decisions at that time to do what they did, they don't represent Penn State to me. They're phonies. So I wanted to get on the board, not because of this issue, but because I wanted to make sure Penn State was here long before I was ever an idea. And it'll be here hopefully long after I'm gone. And I felt like I could have a voice and have some influence in terms of how Penn State makes it through difficult times. And right now, like with college athletics right now, I mean, I'm a guy that has a lot of experience and I'm trying to make sure that we're positioned the right way. So I've always felt like it was an honor to serve Penn State and that, I wanted to make sure that Penn State is positioning itself in everything that we do for a future. So I feel like this is a place that I gave my life to and I'm going to continue to do so.
Yeah.
I love the fact that they still embrace you on this campus. You know what I'm saying? I'm sure that I'm sure that it's amazing that you still embrace the university at this point. You know what I'm saying? Because when these narratives tend to get shifted and it's hard to rectify these type of relationships, how long after your father passed and the season was over, did you go from transitioning to coaching into board of trustees? Because you
5
still
years
coach for another 17 years, right?
After this all went down, then I stopped coaching because and part of it was the association with it. Like there were guys I know, like Jay, I'd love to bring you here, but the athletic director doesn't want to have a press conference and answer questions about your role in all this. So that all, after a couple of years, that just went out the window. But so there's a rule. There was a rule at the time that you had to wait 3 years to be on the board of trustees if you were a university employee.
Okay.
The first year people nominated me, they changed the rule to 5 years because they knew I was coming. So it went to 5 years. And so I've been on the board almost 9 years now. But I mean, it's the universe, the people that are true Penn Staters, have always embraced, like the loyal ones never turned on my dad, didn't turn on our family or anything because they knew what was up. But then, there's other people that don't want to hear the truth. And, in 2013, 2014, I'd been a surrogate speaker in the Obama campaign in 08. I'd done some things with them in the 2010 midterms and even in 2012. And there was some interest in getting me to run for Congress. So I went down. I went to D.C. and Joe Biden pulled me. He was vice president at the time. I'm in the White House, and he says to me, "Hey, I want you to understand a couple things." He said, "I see you are continuing to fight for your dad, and I really respect that because I've gone through things myself." And he talked about some of his own personal problems, where he had some ups and downs. But he said to me, he said, "Jay, just want you to understand one thing." He said, "I know what kind of man your father was. You don't have to tell me." And he said 90% of the people in this country know what kind of person he was. He said the other 10% that you're fighting over, he said, you never had them. You're never going to get them. The hell with them. And he said, and the sooner you understand that, the better off you'll be. You cannot convert everybody. And it was a lesson that I had forgotten that my dad used to tell me. He'd say, look, you want everybody to like you? He said, Jesus Christ, we believe he was the Son of God. He had 12 apostles, and one of them turned on him. So even he couldn't keep everybody in the fold. And he was the Son of God. So who the hell do you think you are? So, I mean, it was that lesson. And I had forgotten it until that moment in the White House when Joe Biden said that to me.
And we'll be right back.
Welcome to Merrick Studios, where stories take the mic and culture comes alive.
We're not just a network, we're family, bringing you smart, soulful, unfiltered conversations.
And this season, we're bringing the heat with our biggest lineup yet. Whatever you're into, music, sports, business, we got you covered.
Merrick Studios, where the conversation starts and keeps going.
Check out our full lineup, including Unglossy with Bun B, Jeffrey Sledge, and myself, Tom Frank. Now streaming at wearemerrickstudios.com.
Master the art of lyricism with Pendulum Mink, the first school for rap. Learn elite techniques through immersive lessons, real-world exercises, and guidance from hip-hop icons. This is where MCs sharpen their skills and glow boldly on the mic. Ready to level up? Visit pendulummink.com and start your journey today.
And now, back to the show. Last question I have before we get into some other sports stuff, though, and this is, I've always wanted to ask somebody this. There was a statue of Joe Paterno that stood, and I remember my parents went there when they took it down. It was a horrible. I just remember. Where is it? Do you know where it is?
I don't know. There is a rumor that it's in a storage facility. Yeah, plenty of rumors. Yeah. I mean, no one has ever told me exactly where it was or where it is. It is still intact. We do know that. There are some rumors it's in a storage facility and off campus somewhere. They went through this whole clandestine of like different trucks going different places to try and get them. And I have a guy, we had a guy played for us who's now a retired Navy SEAL. And he said, Jay, you guys find out where it is. I can get a SEAL team and we will get helicopters and we'll go get it. And I started laughing. I said, you know what? That would be an unbelievable 30 for 30.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I said, and I want to be on that helicopter. As long as you don't shoot anybody. Because the owner of the storage facility, if it's in Pennsylvania, probably like, yeah, have at it. Get it out of here.
Wow. Do you think there's a chance that they would ever put that statue back up, or is it just?
I think at some point. It's just it's just a matter of time, and some of this. There's still some people on our board that are adamantly opposed to it, and they'll get term limited out, and we'll have people that want to do it.
Okay.
Because at this point, they've rolled the wins back in, right? Yep. I mean, all of that has
all those NCAA sanctions, against him were gone because it was. Here's the funny thing, and I know we want to get into some other things, but so when Joe was told about this incident, university policy, state law required him to call his immediate superior. No matter how many wins he has, there is a chain of command that Joe always respected. So Joe did exactly what he was supposed to do. The NCAA came after him, and 2 years after all this went down, the NCAA changed their policy for coaches that get reports of sexual assault to do exactly what Joe did, to report it to your superior and get and not follow up and not get involved in the investigation, so that the integrity. So the NCAA, even though they tried to sanction Joe for what they think he did or didn't do, they then turn around and change the policy to do exactly what he did. And to this day, they have not apologized.
That's crazy.
Wow.
And guys, for you guys who have never been to State College, I bring up the win thing because it always amazed me. There's a spot in State College. It's kind of an odd spot. You know what I'm going to say, Jay? Is it the Target that's right there?
Well,
Were
there's a
they?
hotel. It's a condominium building. There's a restaurant, hotel, and then there's a wall. Yeah, exactly. There's a wall that has tiles for all 409 wins.
All 409 wins, and they're color coded by the team that he had beaten. So, because
Yeah,
at
it's
first,
pretty
as a
cool.
kid, I
Oh,
can remember,
wow.
not even as a kid, because it was years later, but I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, what in the world is this thing? Because at first, you have no idea what it is, but every tile represents a win. Like if it's Nebraska, it was red. If it was, whoever it was, it's pretty cool.
The
It's a
guy that built the
409.
building did it kind of as a protest, kind of like,
Yeah.
they took the statue down. Well, I have to hit the town. The town required him to put public art there.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, okay, I'll do this really cool tile thing, and I won't even tell anybody what it is.
Yeah.
He didn't publicize it. He just put it up and feel like, and finally it started to leak out like, oh, that's what this is. So it was pretty cool.
Wow.
And he didn't even tell us he was doing it. He just called me up and said, hey, I'd like to meet with you and your mom. And then he gave me a diagram and said, this is what these tiles are for. I was like, oh my God, that is wild.
It's brilliant.
Very
Yeah.
creative. Yeah.
Very cool. It's very
Wow.
cool.
Wow.
So you just released a book, which I want to get into a bit, The Blitz.
Yep.
Tell us I can see it right behind you. Tell
Oh,
us a little bit about that and kind of the, where you got to that point in terms of all of this experience and what you're seeing as a changing landscape in college sports.
Well, about 4 years before Blitz, maybe 5, whatever it was, I wrote a book called Hot Seat. And what it really came down to is I had been, I would sit around, people would ask about what's college football really like and what are some cool recruiting stories. And I would tell people stories about recruiting and cars and things, all these things. And they're like, you ought to write a book. So I started to sit down and write this book. And I realized, like, if I write this book and I'm naming names, they're going to be lawyers. I'm going to have lawyers crawling all over me. I'm going to have guys I coach with probably try and blow my car up with me in it. So I said, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to write this as a fictional piece. So I basically said the head coach at Ohio State, I had recruited in the state of Ohio for 17, 18 years. So I have familiarity. I knew Urban Meyer well. I knew Jim Tressel well. So I knew a lot of the things at Ohio State. So I put it at Ohio State. So the guy loses to Michigan. He loses his bowl game. And the president says, I can only hold off our board of trustees for one more year. You got to win this year. So it goes through all the things that he has values. There's some core values he has, but they're tested constantly. And it takes you through that. So that was 5 years ago. So after that, I started to do some consulting in NIL with a group that was all over the country. I'm on the board of trustees, so I'm aware of all these things that are going on around the country and talking to coaches and ADs, and I'm still friends with. And I said, you know what? I'm going to now do the sequel to that book in the NIL transfer portal age that we're in right now. So this is really the first book that takes you inside what it's like to be a head football coach in this era where, a guy can tell you he's leaving at the drop of a hat, and there's no way. Everybody's a free agent, and now you're not recruiting the parent and his kid, the player and his parents anymore. Now you got to have a conversation with an agent, and now you've got all these other and all the pressures and all the social media stuff. There's a part in the book where where there's a police officer shoots a young black man in Columbus. And now how does the head coach, who's white, the players come to him and say, we got to do something. How does he handle that? Because that's very real, and we've seen that. So I talked to guys that have gone through that. I put that in there. There are other things about the mental health aspect of this, where now all of a sudden it's the coaches, the phone is next to him all the time, because he can get a call at any time. And how does he deal with that constant pressure? And then there's the pressure of the kids with the players with the NIL money. Everybody thinks it's all puppies and rainbows and happy times because they're getting money. They don't realize, well, kid wants to stay at the school, but mom and dad or mom or whoever is saying, you know what? This school's going to give you more money. I want you out of here. Or you're not playing enough, you're out of here, or whatever it is. And so now they're dealing with being a breadwinner for a family in a lot of cases and making more money, and now dealing with a lot of other things that they weren't thinking of. Or they've got to go out on social media after a game when they don't play well, and they say, oh, I drank Gatorade after the game, and all these people come at you on social media. What's the mental health toll on that? there's all these things that go with it that nobody talks about that we put in the book so people kind of understand what it's really like now. It's not a one-way street. It's not everything's great. There's a lot of pressure and a lot of issues that these guys are dealing with now.
And the thing about the NIL thing, which is like you can't put the cat back in the bag. You can't pay people and then a few years later say, you know what, we're going to change this back to how it used to be. It is what it is. And I'm sure as the money rises, it's going to get more intense. You know, like even this weekend, well, last weekend rather, with Indiana, watching them like come out of nowhere, literally and win a natty. And then you find out like, was it 47 guys on the team was between 23 and 25 years old. So they were grown men basically playing kids. Like it's all these other things that were not part of the game before. It's really a wild landscape. What are you thinking about where it's going to go?
Well, I think this. I mean, there was a settlement, the House versus the NCAA, which kind of set us where we are now. Where now you have a revenue sharing deal where the school has to share up to $20.5 million with athletes. Now, 75% of that goes to football, 15% of that goes to men's basketball, 5% goes to women's basketball, and 5% goes to all the other sports. Okay, so that's the revenue sharing part. Then you have the NIL part where, there was real NIL, and then, real NIL was Caitlin Clark. State Farm says, you know what? We're putting Caitlin Clark in the commercial because there's a return on investment for us because she raises our profile. Then you had these fake NILs with these collectives that would come in and just pay guys, essentially pay to play. That's been replaced a little bit by the revenue sharing. So we had all these things going on, all this money's kind of coming in, and it's all based on this one settlement. Well, the truth of the matter is, if somebody sues and says, well, wait a minute, you can't impose a revenue sharing cap or a salary cap on me. I wasn't part of that lawsuit. I didn't agree to that. They're going to lose. And now we're going to be right back to square one. I mean, the athletic director of Miami said, well, we shouldn't have a salary cap. Well, okay, then let's see how that's working for baseball. The Dodgers are going to freaking win the thing again. But I mean, so I think where this has to go is, and I'm as a trustee, I've been talking to trustees at other schools, major schools, and we're starting to have some conversations about, everybody's complained about the problem. There's two types of people in the world in an organization. There's problem people and there's solution people. We've got tons of problem people, coaches, former coaches, athletic directors. Oh, well, this isn't right. This isn't right. Okay, well, what's your solution? And so we're talking about, I think the reality is this, we got to be honest about what we are. We're running a sports entertainment enterprise on our campus, whether we want to admit it or not. We're not going back to what it was. I'm an old school guy. I wish it could go back. I love the purity of it, but I'm also a realist. And I've been radicalized in terms of, when we had COVID and we made our players stay on campus and all the other students weren't there. Why were they there? Because we needed that TV check. We need that money from the Big Ten. So we got to be honest about what we are. I mean, if right before the game on Saturday night or Monday night, if all the Miami players and all the Indian players walked off, I wouldn't sit around and watch those two coaches, Signetti and now I'm trying to Cristobal. I wouldn't sit there and watch them play cornhole for an hour, for 3 hours. I mean, they may be the best cornhole players on the planet. I mean, given the way Signetti touches everything and turns to gold, who knows? But that's not as entertaining as what we saw, obviously. And that we're not there to watch those guys. We're there to watch those players play. So that's the reality of it. So I think you're going to get to a point where you're going to have to get some antitrust protection. You're going to have collective bargaining in a players union, whether we like it or not. Because at the end of the day, now we're talking 16-team playoff, 24-team playoff. Who's not at the table to make those decisions right now? The players. Right. Because you say to Mendoza, hey, you got to play another game. The beating he took.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't ask him to do that without being, so we got to be realistic about what we are. And I think until we do that, we're going to be in a mess.
Is it a joke to even say student athlete at this point? I mean, the thing that I thought you were going to say, Jeffrey, earlier is Carson Beck. He was in an interview where he said they were asking him about, did you have to skip class? And he's like, I've been to class in 2 years. I graduated already. Like, I don't know. Like, there's something about the student athlete just doesn't seem right. And I think that to your point, you just got to throw that out. It's got to be out of the
Well,
mix.
you know, when you see guys jumping schools to 3 or 4 schools, what kind of progress are they making towards a
Yeah.
degree? I mean, but look, I think if you said to me, I'm the czar of college football, what's my solution? My solution is you go recruit a kid out of high school and you say, look, you got 2 tracks. Okay. If you want to come here and sign a 4-year deal with us, we're going to give you room, board, books, and tuition. You're going to go to school. You have to adhere to certain academic standards, and you're going to make progress towards a degree. But you're guaranteed a spot here for 4 years. We can't cut you after a year. And if you want to transfer for legitimate reasons, not because, oh, I'm just not happy today, or I don't like this guy, there's a process for you to do that, like there was 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Offer that to kids. Then you say to other kids, hey, look, if you just want to have an NFL apprenticeship, we'll have a program for you where we'll teach you financial literacy, we'll teach you public relations, we'll teach you nutrition, those kind of things. And if you, at the end of 1 year, if you want to leave, you can go to another school. But at the end of the 1 year, if you're not good enough, we can cut you loose too. So this is how the world works. You want a 1 year deal? We get a 1 year deal. So I think if you give people those 2 tracks, now you can still have those student athletes that you want to come there and get an education. I mean, most of the best football players I've ever been around were guys that were really, really good students, because that just translated into everything they did in their life, that they were on top of things. So if we, but like I said, be honest about what we are. A guy I know used to tell a joke about a woman who went into confession and says to the priest, bless me, Father, for I've sinned. I had sex with someone who was not my husband for $100,000. And the priest says, well, would you have done it for 10,000? And she said, what kind of person do you think I am? He said, well, we've established what kind of person you are. It's just a matter of what's the price point. And that's where college athletics is right now. We are what we are. But what is the pricing model, so to speak? And I'll probably get killed for telling that joke.
Yeah.
I got a
What
question,
do
Jake.
you go ahead.
I'm sorry, Tom.
Go ahead, Glenn.
I'm curious about this while we're talking about NIL and all this stuff. Yesterday, I saw a story that said that I believe it's Mark Cuban is willing to play Mendoza the same amount of money that he would make with his rookie deal to stay at Indiana. One, do you know if there's truth to that? And if so, what is the purpose of a private individual doing that?
I don't think it's true. I've not seen Mark Cuban confirm that, so I don't think it's true. And I think Mendoza was on Jimmy Fallon or something the other night talking about going to the NFL. So I think that's probably done.
I saw him.
And I think he might, his eligibility might be up anyway. But what you're seeing now is, like the head coach at Arizona State was a candidate for some other jobs and said he was going to stay. And he went out and said, what we need is someone in this community to write us a check for $20 million. But the thing about it is that's not a $20 million, which endows what we need for the next 20 years. That's
Right.
every year you got to do that. So we're at a point now where you're asking people to write you a check to cover your payroll. That's not a business model, and that's got to change. And I think we're on a, and I'm, like I said, as a member of the board of Penn State, where we're starting to dance on the edge of a very dangerous situation is if we're going to go out and get donors to cover our payroll. Sooner or later, the donors are going to want more than just getting to stand on the sideline or whatever.
Absolutely.
They're going to say, what's my return on investment?
Exactly.
And it might be a championship for 1 year, but if you keep coming at me for $20 million or $5 million or whatever, well, wait a minute. I want an ownership stake in this thing.
Yeah.
And you're seeing like the University of Utah is starting to talk about a private equity deal where a company's going to come in and essentially create a business enterprise out of their athletic department, professionalize it. And being realistic about what it is, I don't think that's a one-off. I think that you're going to see more and more of those conversations happening, because right now, even a school like Penn State, we're in the top 10 in terms of athletic department revenues. Okay. We barely break even. Okay. There are years we lose a couple $100,000 or $1 million. There's years we make $1 million. And that's before we got to the $20.5 million revenue share. So this year, there's this $20 million thing that's now on our budget, and we are really squeezed. And it's going to be interesting to see. But I think schools are going to have to really take a good hard look at what we're paying coaches, because you got to find the money somewhere. or you're going to have to be forced to take on some private equity.
I saw after Indiana won, I saw I was been watching, sports stuff, and it was saying it's kind of a good and a bad thing because obviously it's good with this tournament. It kind of gives it the March Madness kind of feel, like anybody could win. But the bad part of it is now like a school like, let's say, Temple University, right, or University of Maryland, or schools that are usually in the mix. They see Indiana and they go, "We can win a chip now." Like we're gonna, like you said, we're gonna start spending money and go harder at the donors and do all that stuff because we, like you said, Utah, because they feel like they got a shot. And a school like Oregon, they must really feel like they got a shot because they got Phil Knight in their pockets. They're like, okay, we got a billionaire. How much is it going to cost to get us in that thing? So it kind of, I don't know. The corruption is about. I think personally, I think the corruption is about to get really crazy.
Oh, no question. And we have not even talked about the gambling element.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that, which is in the book. I mentioned that in the book in Blitzed about, there are some things with the gambling, but with being able to place a prop bet on a college player. I mean, you're seeing it with some of the basketball stuff now. The story just broke last week with mid-major schools, because if you're going to, the guys that can go to the NBA, they're not going to risk point shaving because there's too much money, 6 months from now. They're only there a year. But the guys that aren't, there's a lot of temptation there to they're not getting NIL deals for $2 million. And someone says, "Hey, I'll put $100,000 in your pocket if you make sure the next couple of games." I don't want you to throw the game. I don't want you to lose. Just don't win by what you're supposed to. And ironically, one of the schools that's in that case there were players from Tulane. And I'm old enough to remember in the early 80s, Tulane shut down their basketball program because there was a major point shaving scandal. And we're right back. And so there's a lot of things going on here that you got to be concerned about. And the pressures, as you said, everybody now thinks it's the Signetti effect. I mean, everybody go, "Oh, you know what? If we got the right guy and he put the right," people forget, the biggest difference between Indiana last year, and they were a playoff team last year. People forget that. And this year is the quarterback. They got the right quarterback out of the portal. Now, did they know he was going to be a Heisman Trophy winner? If you put truth serum in him, they'd probably say, no, of course not. Nobody could have predicted he was going to play the way he played. I mean, a lot of people thought he was going to be really good. But, I mean, they got lightning in a bottle, and they had a team with an average age of 23. And that's not to downplay what they did. Because I think the thing people underestimate, coaching in some ways is going to be more important now than it's ever been. Because any fool with a checkbook can put a roster together. Yeah. But can you make that roster into a team? And one thing that came through with those Indiana guys is they genuinely cared and loved each other. And they played for each other. They played really hard as a team. And I think they really respected their coach as well. And I think he did a great job putting that team together, no question, and creating a group and a culture and environment.
Absolutely. I got one more quick question. I'm sorry I'm dominating, but what happened with James Franklin, man?
I was just going to ask that, so we're on the same page. Because before you answer that,
I never got a clear story. What happened, man?
I'm a Hokie, by the way. I grew up in State College, Pennsylvania, but I went to Virginia Tech, and I'm watching all these players go from Penn State to Virginia Tech, and all the Iowa State guys going to Penn State. This is crazy.
It's bizarre. I mean, it really is bizarre. But look, I think this year was this summer, as a Penn Stater, there was a lot of hype about Penn State. Okay. And I have a TV show I do every week during the season called Nittany Game Week. We break down, and I break down film and talk about it. So in the summer, Penn State got to the national semis a year ago. And they got all these guys to come back. They paid them money. They put all these things in place. They brought in a defense coordinator from Ohio State. And it was like, oh, we're just going to roll because Michigan did the same thing 2 years ago. Ohio State did it last year. So we're just going to. And I kept saying, can you make these guys play together as a team, number one? And number two, Jeff, I don't know if you're a Giants fan, New York Giants.
No, I'm a Raiders fan, but okay. I know the Giants.
Yeah. So the one of the years they won the Super Bowl when Coughlin was there, The next, and I'll never forget that I was still coaching, and it was one of those things I heard, and I know Tom Coughlin. His son actually played at University of Virginia when I started my coaching career, so I'd known Tom Coughlin for a while. But they interviewed him and said, you're not picked to win the NFC East this year, and whatever, all these things about what do you think your team needs to improve on? You won the Super Bowl, and he said we won our division at 9-7 last year. He said we're a 9-7 football team. We got a lot of things we got to work on. So as I looked at Penn State from the national semifinal year 2 years ago in 2024, I said, this team was 11-1 at the end of the regular season. There were 3 games. They were 1 play away from losing.
Yeah.
That team, and I said, this team was as close to being 8-4 as they were to being 11-1. And I said, if they don't have the right attitude in the summer, because everybody just kept talking about, oh my God, this is the year, everything's in place. My freshman year in 1986 at Penn State, they had played for the national championship the year before. And all those guys came back. But those guys worked even harder that year than they did the year before. So Penn State played 3 teams out of conference that weren't very good. And then they had an off week, and then Oregon came in. And I said before the season, I said that Oregon game might be the most important game in James Franklin's career.
Agreed.
Because we really won't know if we're really as good as we think we are. And if they lose that game, it will be he can't win the big games. It'll be they're frauds. All this will cycle around, even though it's only 1 loss. After that loss, at the end of the third quarter, it was 17-3 Oregon. The fans are chanting "Fire Franklin." We're number 2 in the country. We're down 14 points at home to the number 5 team, and you're chanting "Fire the coach." So I'm like, what is wrong with these people? They come back, they get the lead, and they lose in overtime. And this town was a morgue. It was like a morgue here the whole next week. And I don't think this team ever came out of that hangover. I don't think James may not have come out of that hangover. I think it was just there was so much pressure on it. And then you fast forward a couple weeks later, Indiana goes out to Oregon, they beat them. So it was Oregon lost the game. And Dan Lanning walks in that post-game press conference and says, hey, look, yeah, we lost the game. It was a tough game, but every goal we set out for ourselves before the season is still there. And the difference in how they handled the loss, as Penn State did versus how Oregon did. And Oregon obviously made a run, and they got to the playoffs and lost Indiana like everybody else did. But, they made a great run. So I think that was really what happened. And then they go out to UCLA and lose. Then they lose Northwestern home.
Yeah.
And I think I wouldn't have pulled the trigger like they did at that point. But, that wasn't my call. It wasn't up to me. But they did. And so, he's off to Virginia Tech. I think he'll do well there. I think Matt Campbell will come here and do well at Penn State too. So I don't think it's I think it could be a good thing for both schools.
But I agree with you. The interesting thing, and the thing that's just so odd to me though, is that, and I guess there's some validity to you go to a school for the coach a lot. Now it's a lot more, but I'm just amazed at how fast he brought so many of those guys from Penn State are now showing up in Blacksburg. To me, that's just unbelievable. And in some ways, it's everything that's wrong with the system. Like, it just doesn't seem that that's right. But at the same time, Virginia Tech's going to benefit potentially from it.
Yeah, look, as I said, we're in a totally unrestricted free agency world now. So, with James leaving, he had the ability. Those guys know who he is. They know what his program is about, and they know what to expect. So that's a very comforting thing. And our coaching search went on for 54 days before we announced the coach. So there was this big void, and a lot of guys saying, "Well, where am I? What's the new guy going to be like? I don't know what's coming." So that was that was problematic for us. We ended up in the right place, but guys left because they want to know what's known versus unknown. And so I think that's, like I said, we talk about what comes next. I think college football's got to get to be a little bit more like the NFL. We need to reshape the entire calendar for when guys can transfer, when coaches can do certain things. Mike Tomlin was coaching the Steelers and trying to get in the playoffs. The Dolphins fired their coach. If the Dolphins had contacted Mike Tomlin before the season was over, they would lose draft picks. They'd have a massive fine, all those things. So I think we need to start, like, if you're under contract, you're under contract. You don't talk to it. We got to get to a kind of a labor market, so to speak, like that for players and coaches in college football. I think that'd be good for the game, because I think we run the risk over the long term of really kind of getting fans to turn away from the game because of the chaos that's involved. I mean, I hear more and more people say, "I can't even follow this anymore." Like it's ridiculous. I'm done with it. And I hear that a lot. And I said, it's like, no, I'm just rooting for a jersey now. The guy the guy that we recruited out of high school is gone in a year.
Yeah.
So there's not even any kind of attachment to anything. And coaches are jumping all over the place. And look, I don't fault Lane Kiffin for doing what he did, because that's what the market is. And that's where it is. He's not the problem. The problem is the system that we have.
All of us were rooting for Ole Miss, though. I wanted to see Ole Miss win that so bad, just to
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jay, let me ask you this. What's next for you professionally, and personally?
Well, working on another book, got a TV show, doing some consulting and NIL stuff still.
Okay.
A lot of different, it's a lot of different things happen. And so every morning I wake up and say, okay, what needs to be done today? The next book's going to be it's going to be a nonfiction book on leadership, because I've been fortunate in my life to be around a lot of great people that are great leaders. Many of them you would know by our household names. Many of them you would never have heard of. But all through this journey, I've always tried to keep my mouth shut as much as I can and listen as much and pick up things. And you talk about anything from presidents of the United States to CEOs of major corporations to even in my own house. As great a leader as people think my dad is or was, my mom in many ways was his equal or superior, because of what she's done. I mean, this is a woman who, at 85 years old now, coming up in 86, is still on the board of State Special Olympics in Pennsylvania, still raising boatloads of money for that. Still, when the State Special Olympics go on, there's thousands of athletes here. She's driving around these golf carts from this venue to that venue, and she's hitting these people. She's still raising money for Penn State. I mean, she's just an unbelievable human being. But all these different people, and the reason I want to write this book now is because what we think passes for leadership in this country is, I tell you what to do because I said so, and I have a title, and I can and you have to because I said so. I never admit I'm wrong. I just simply keep doubling down on anything I say that's wrong, and kind of know where I'm going with this one. But I mean, you're seeing it not just in politics. You're seeing it in business. You're seeing it in athletics. You're seeing people that the greatest leaders that the world has ever known have been people that, when they make a mistake, have said, look, we made a mistake, and they've learned from the mistake, and they've helped everybody learn from the mistake, and they've gone after it. And so, I've been fortunate to be around people like that, and I just want to remind people that that's what it's like. I mean, like I said, I've had kind of a Forrest Gump existence. I mean, I have bumped into and been around people, and you just go, I mean, hopefully I'm a little smarter than Forrest Gump. I'm not sure some days, but I'll put it this way: I didn't get Apple stock before it was anything like he did in that movie, or didn't create a Bubba Gump shrimp company like he did in that movie. But I think there's some things to be, and it's not my wisdom; it's other people's wisdom, and it just I think that's needed right now. I think people need to talk about what it really looks like, as opposed to what we think it is now.
I forgot to ask one question. I got to ask this: Al Pacino as playing your dad, good or bad?
They got some things really wrong in that movie, which is unfortunate. And I would have rather seen. The good thing is, like, people I know, there was a guy that played me. I can't think of his name now, but people are like, wow, you're better looking than he is. I'm like, good. You wouldn't want like some, a really good looking dude playing you. People are like, that's who they picked to play you? You look nothing like that. But, the thing about Al Pacino is it's hard not to see Al Pacino. When he's playing a real life character, because he's done a couple movies like that, you're like, that's Al Pacino. It's Al Pacino. You like it. You can't lose yourself in the character. But they got some things wrong. They got some things right. But that's what happens with these movies. And the thing that's frustrating is when they make a movie like that, based on truth or based on a true story.
Yeah,
they should really have to adhere to the truth of the story, because there are people that watched that movie and walked away and said, "Oh, And
that
they
was
think
it.
that's really what happened, and
That's
it's not
what
what happened.
happened.
There were things in there that didn't happen that they put in there. So I mean, look, that's just the nature of the beast, and that's being, the thing about it is when you're a public persona, the bar for defamation in a lawsuit or slander or whatever it is really, really high. You have to prove malice, you have to prove recklessness, that kind of stuff. So I mean, to go after anybody we wouldn't be able to anyway. But not that I would have, but they screened the movie for, I went to New York and HBO showed me the movie before it came out, and they said, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, there were some good things in there. There's some things that weren't quite so good and things you didn't get right. But what are you gonna do?"
Yeah.
That's why they always say based on a true story, because they can't say this is
Exactly.
a true story. They have to leave some room to
Yes.
absolve them for what they do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, no one ever reads the based part. I mean? You're 100% right.
Yeah.
Based on true events, at least Law and Order, they're like ding ding, and then it says, they put that disclaimer like ripped from the headlines, but they change everybody's name and all that kind of stuff. And some of those you're like, I remember that story, but at least
Hey, we really appreciate it. I appreciate your honesty, your willingness to dive in on all these different topics. I mean, I've really enjoyed getting to talk to you and to seeing you again. It's been a really long time. So thank you.
This is a lot of fun, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
John.
very
Thank
much.
you for joining us.
It was really good, man. Really had fun.
Until next week, leave us your comments or questions on the show on Instagram at UnglossiPod or YouTube at Merrick Studios and spread the word, listeners. Until then, I'm Tom Frank.
I'm Jeffrey Sledge.
And I'm Bun B.
Unglossied is produced and distributed by Merrick Studios.